This episode of Powerhouse is brought to you today by Poly.
That's the question of the hour in terms of how do you design a product that's highly desirable, but at the same time doesn't break the bank on the cost segment, but also doesn't hurt the planet. And I think that's been the problem we're trying to solve here.
Welcome to Powerhouse, where we interview the biggest names in housing and ask them about their strategy for growth. I'm Diego Sanchez, president of HousingWire, and my guest today is Vikas Enti, CEO of Reframe Systems. Vikas, it's so great to have you on the show.
It's wonderful to be here, Diego. Thank you so much for having us.
Before we dive in, could you briefly introduce yourself and Reframe Systems?
Yeah, so I'm the CEO, co-founder of Reframe Systems, started the company about 2.5 years ago. Prior to starting Reframe, I spent over a decade at Amazon Robotics, helping make same-day shipping a reality for all. I have deployed over 500,000 robots across 70 plus fulfillment centers. If I go way back, trained as a mechanical engineer, but did most of my work in systems engineering and then product development. I'm a dad of 2 beautiful twin daughters. They're the reason Reframe exists today. And happy to dive into any of those things, but happy to be here.
Yeah, that's really interesting. 11 years with Amazon Robotics must have been really fascinating. How do you feel like that experience prepares you for what you're trying to build at Reframe?
I feel like a lot of the confidence in wanting to start Reframe and knowing that we could be part of the solution came from the realization that all the work that I got it alongside with my team at Amazon Robotics. I was a startup called Kiva Systems first that Amazon then bought. And we became Amazon Robotics, and we went from deploying 300 robots in our very first fulfillment center to eventually ending my career there were 500,000 robots built. That was the kind of scale that really allowed us to get, at least personally taught me how do you think about systems from the standpoint of how do you design systems that are built for scale, where software actually drives the scalability and flexibility, but also systems where software enables you to make the underlying cost lower for the hardware of the systems that go in, but also allows you to take overall process costs out of the equation. And I think there's a lot of my career was kind of built around how do you apply technology to lower costs and increase speed. And that kind of has become the ethos that was built up. Where it clicked for me in terms of, okay, how does this experience actually relevant for home building? It was a more convoluted path. Became a dad. That was a moment of introspection for me to say, where else could I be applying my skills in a new industry? Climate change was already top of mind, but I was reading the book Speed and Scale when my daughters were born. Speed by John Doerr, and that really laid out the recipe for how you avoid the climate disaster. It kind of laid the premise that all the technologies and materials we need to reduce carbon emissions already exist today. The only challenge is that they don't have an engine to propagate those changes quickly, at scale, and efficiently from a cost standpoint. And so to me, it's great. The skills I bring to the table are how do you actually scale things and bring them to market quickly. So it's okay, I have at least a piece of the solution, or what is the problem I need to go after? And it really shone light on housing and the built environment. 40% of our emissions come from our homes. So it's a clear place to say there's an opportunity for us to go after this space to reduce emissions. But it was a long path from that realization to eventually arriving at a solution that Reframe is building today to make sure we can build climate resilient homes extremely efficiently, extremely quickly, and predictably.
Really interesting origin story, but you picked an industry that is maybe one of the most antiquated in the US and globally. Home building primarily has the same technologies that were in use 100 years ago. How can your experience in really ramping up robotics at Amazon be applied to an industry that is still, working with technologies that are from a century ago?
I think it's a common saying that if you were to bring a carpenter from the 1800s, they would be very comfortable on a job site today because the process hasn't changed. While the overall process architecture hasn't changed in how homes get built, there has actually been a lot of technology progress in individual levels, right? Like if you think about all the work that's happened on the software side, in the world of BIM for architects, how you actually get to interface in pretty high resolution in 3D to make sure you're actually building your entire building in 3D before you build that on the job site. That's actually unlocked a lot of efficiencies over time to allow better collaboration between different technology players. Like to us, we feel like there's been pockets of technology adoption across the home building stack, but just the fundamental process of home building hasn't changed. And that's what we're trying to change because we believe that that's where we're leaving significant opportunity for driving costs down and increasing efficiency. So at least the good news is, right, we're entering a market where there's already been technology adoption in different segments. So the stakeholders we're working with, if you're working with code submission authorities or code review authorities, if you're working with, we do work with external MEP engineers to actually get a lot of engineering work done. We're all working on similar technology stacks to make sure that all of our information comes together, right? So we're in the world of, at least in the AEC stack, we're glad there's technology adoption. So at least the first piece, we're not having to climb a pretty big hurdle. But we've had to invent a whole bunch of things after that fact. Like today, all the work that happens in the BIM stack, super useful to allow architects and engineers to communicate with each other, allow GCs to be part of the same conversation. Also makes it easy to then generate all the artifacts you need for code submissions to get permit approvals. And also obviously generate really pretty pictures for marketing and sales. But the place where all that value ends, unfortunately, is when you try to convert that information into instructions that you could use to build on a job site or build in a factory. That is where we believe there's been a massive divide in the industry and a poor realization that construction, in fact, is a logistics and information problem. And all the effort we're putting in technology today only solves for the information layer on the design side, but almost none of that information cascades down to how you would use those design information to manufacture or to construct product. So Reframe, we've had to kind of take the stance to say, construction is a logistics problem first. So how do you make sure you're designing a system that embraces that construction is always local? You have to interface with the job site. How do you design? In our case, we believe manufacturing is the way to solve this problem. We've invented a microfactory, and the whole goal of the microfactory is that how do you make sure it's roughly the size of the garden center at Home Depot? How can we locate microfactories that are right at similar distances of Home Depots from job sites? Right? How do you actually deploy them where they're right within an hour of major metropolitan areas? You're actually close to the job site, you're close to your customers. You don't make logistics a barrier from a cost standpoint, but also by being close to customers, you also take this whole stigma and the offsite construction isn't very approachable for a lot of developers today because you're having to find factories that are 2 or 3 states away. It's a remote concept. But the moment you say, hey, it's no different than you going to a Home Depot, it's right there. I think we've already been able to break a lot of the mental stigma and barriers to adoption. So that's one piece on logistics.
Could we pause there just for a moment? Because I think what that means is that there's a Reframe Systems factory. There's a lot of them eventually, right? Like if you want to have a factory within an hour of every potential home building site, that means you're going to have to scale up to a lot of factories. Is that accurate?
Absolutely. There's about 2,000 Home Depots across the country. I expect that for every 3 or 4 Home Depots, there's a microfactory in that same vicinity. So we expect needing at least 200 to 300 microfactories across the US to continue attacking the problem. And there's a lot more of that needed around the world.
And how many is there just one microfactory now, or do you have a couple that have rolled out?
So we have one microfactory today. We're about 20 miles north of Boston. And our roadmap is to get a second microfactory up in California. So we're focused on LA. We're looking at helping with the fire rebuild with Altadena first. So we'll be setting up manufacturing capacity there. And the goal is to be in 5 markets over the next 5 years. So at the very least, we'll have 5 microfactories across the country. But looking at the traction we're seeing with customers, I would be surprised if the number is twice that by 2030.
And could you tell me more about what a Reframe Systems home looks and feels like? I've been to builder trade shows and seen some of the innovation in modular housing and in 3D printing, but just to be candid, a lot of them are ugly. So how are you thinking about aesthetic as you think about the really important issue of climate change and obviously costs?
That's the question of the the hour in terms of how do you design a product that's highly desirable, but at the same time doesn't break the bank on the cost segment, but also doesn't hurt the planet. And I think that's been the problem we're trying to solve here. Trying to think about your comment on, right, like a lot of factory built housing historically has been very constrained by starting with the box. Like the whole industry evolved from the manufactured housing industry where you're constrained by the trailer size. And the whole industry kind of said you're building homes as either single wide or double wide. You put one trailer or two trailers. That's where the industry kind of took birth. And over time they said, hey, we can actually also do site built construction, but let's build to local codes, but build them in a factory. But all of traditional modular construction is constrained by the box size. They start with the box and then they try to fit out the actual floor plan for the home. And that also constrains your actual user experience inside. But even the way your whole floor plan stacks up and you have the massing for a building, not always does it represent, right, the look and feel of the neighborhood. Where we've had enough advances over time is especially with the advent of BIM, the advent of digital modeling, we're able to break this mold to say, we can actually start with the floor plan and then find the right box dimensions to make sure we're modularizing the structure appropriately. For Reframe, we have an advantage in that we treat this as a logistics problem. By having factories that are close by, I don't have to index on building the largest box that can be built in a factory. I can actually build the smallest box that encapsulates the floor plan that I need and get to that experience. And there's a thing we lean on very heavily, and this is where there's been a fundamental shift in the rest of the industry. The whole industry has been very focused on standardization so they can get to mass production. How do you get to a low mix, high volume operation? We've really been indexing on what we call mass customization. Like, how do we make sure that we have a bunch of reference product designs? And if you look at our website, you'll find that a lot of these, the look and feel, right, matches or mirrors what you would find built stick built, right? Like we're able to, for New England today, right, there's a huge appeal for building homes that have a standard gable roof, the facade treatments, the window fenestration details, all of this is a very New England-esque look and feel, and we've been catering to that with our product line. But we're also trying to modify the same product for how do we meet the look and feel for what it would look like in Southern California. So the roof lines look different, the window proportions look different. So these are all things that we get to parameterize as part of our building platform. All the invention we have on the manufacturing side and how we can go what we call pixels to parts. How do you go from the CAD model that we have into manufacturing instructions that go to the robot, that go to our apprentices on their iPads? We've built a system that allows us that no matter what the design actually looks like, it breaks down pretty nicely to a set of repeatable actions that we can perform across our manual operations and automated operations. So we've built a system that allows us to do mass customization at scale. What this means for the customer is that we're able to make sure that we can both react to the differences of the site, right? Like the huge challenge with construction, and the reason we haven't had enough adoption of manufacturing techniques is all of manufacturing has been built for, right, you do low mix, you build a standard product and find a way to repeat and scale it. But for construction, given the variability of site conditions, all your different state building codes, and the 30,000 zoning jurisdictions, you very quickly find that you almost always have to site customize a design to maximize the value for the customer to make it legally compliant. And today has been a pretty high cost to do that because you're having to make it highly manual in the whole design process, but also the manufacturing process. In our case, software takes over there. It gives us a low marginal cost to make these customizations. But what this also means for us is we get to embrace the local design language that's needed. Mm-hmm. So I also would argue that, right, like design is highly subjective, and the aesthetic appeal is highly subjective. We still index more on having designs that are not necessarily boxy, but designs that have envelopes that are extremely optimized for insulation, airtightness, for fire resiliency. And these tend to be, right, facades and fenestrations that are fairly flat, because that's the best way for you to make sure you have minimal overhangs, minimal opportunities for air leakage, minimal opportunities for, right, any wildfire intrusions. So there are certain trade-offs we have to make, which allows us to maximize energy performance and resiliency. And that's the place where, right, I think we probably won't win every single customer out there, right, but those are some trade-offs we've had to make.
So you talk about regional and even local customization. So let's say you have 200 to 300 factories across the country. Does each one of those factory have a team of designers and architects who are thinking about that local flavor when when you build homes?
Yeah, our expectation is that we're able to localize the designs and localize the supply chain with every microfactory that we launch. It's not clear to me if every microfactory will need to have its own design team. I expect that we will still centralize. We'll have pockets of design teams across the country that have local context. Uh, Maybe they're sitting in a design office versus a factory. But the other piece we also get to do is we get to train up the factory team to be able to build local context a lot more deeply. So as an example, a microfactory that's based in Massachusetts will have to know how to deal with gable roof design details, how to deal with cedar shingle facades, how to deal with a lot more exterior insulation to deal with the weather, the climate zone we're here in. But a factory that's built in California will have to know how to deal with different types of facade options that are not cedar shingle, not shiplap. Might have to get better at doing details that are relevant for seismic loading, less details for exterior. So there's a lot of localized, like construction is local. So to us, a microfactory approach allows us to break the need that one factory has to learn how to build for 5 different climate zones, which is the case today for most of the players in the industry.
Yeah, this is really interesting. And so if you think about Home Depot or Lowe's, they are B2C. They're not B2B. They're not working with home builders to work with homeowners. So how do you think about Reframe Systems as you scale? Are you going to go direct to the consumer, or are you going to work through the 40,000 plus custom home builders that are across the country?
Yeah, so today we've actually gone one step further in that we're working with developers, right? So the segment of the market we're focused on is missing middle housing. So for the next 5 years, we want to get really good at and become the best infill builder. And the way I would use the word builder here is how do we become the best infill design build GC that can partner with smaller scale developers who are doing infill housing. They're adding density in existing neighborhoods with duplexes, triplexes, small multifamily. We want to be their go-to-market partner where they find the land and the financing, and we basically go in with a turnkey solution where a home magically appears. And the reason we pick developers as our first ideal customer is we believe that the best customer is a repeat customer. And to us, developers have a long-term pipeline, and the more we can get ourselves plugged into their pipeline, the higher odds we have to make sure that every factory we build, we're able to continue to keep its pipeline fully utilized and make sure the factory is fully fed. This also allows us to do something which is interesting, where every microfactory that we set up, our goal is to set that up as a joint venture entity. And by partnering with developers, we can actually have them come in as capital partners in every factory. So that allows us to make sure that we have local partners, local context, local capital, and local demand that makes sure that we're de-risking every factory that goes out there. And we will sell to retail customers, but the experience is going to be a little different, right? I think today, for a retail consumer, usually when they're going through the process of building a home, it's a very personal experience. The industry has kind of created this expectation that you can customize every single aspect of the home to get your dream home. And we're able to do that, but it comes at significant trade-offs of capital efficiency and time efficiency. So we want to learn a lot through developers, understand like what does the ideal home actually look like? Like get through enough design cycles to say, we believe this is the perfect bathroom. We've spent X hundred hours, right, researching the bathroom, testing it out, building enough prototypes to know that it meets all the aesthetic requirements, and we run user group studies around it. It meets all the functional requirements, meets all the code requirements. So we want to bring like a true product development approach. And we believe the best way for us to do that is to learn through developers who built incredibly good instincts on what their customers would want for either rental properties or for sale properties. And the goal for us is to be able to learn this over the next couple of years so that we build enough conviction to say, the designs we have, we can actually recommend that to a retail customer to say, you should pick our design. This is actually as good as it gets. And to us, like today, I think it's a much harder behavioral change to go through. We're going to be learning some of this as we go through the process in rebuilding in Altadena, because in Altadena, most of the properties have to be rebuilt. Right? We're working with retail homeowners who are rebuilding properties that they lost through the fire damage. So we're having to deal with the trauma of it, plus also how do you rebuild something that's better and has more value. So we'll have to learn a bunch there.
That makes a lot of sense to me. I'm familiar with the new home process, and there's almost too much choice in that current process, right? I would guess that most consumers would be okay with some choice restriction if it could impact the final cost.
Absolutely. So we kind of fell into one project we're working on today. It's a multi-generational, it's a triple decker, it's a New England building type. It's 3 apartments stacked on top of each other.
Very familiar. I grew up in the Boston area.
Amazing. So it's as New England of a triple decker as it gets. It's a multi-generational living situation. It's a retail customer. We weren't seeking them out. We were trying to sell to their employer, and then it somehow cascaded becoming a personal project. But at least what we learned through this is giving them choices on the finishes for cabinets, colors for walls, some finish choices for flooring and facade. These 4 things have been like the big drivers of decision. We initially were concerned that they would be driving a lot more changes to the floor plan and the overall look and feel for the building. But we're learning that there's actually a way to nudge customer behavior where it actually is constrained to finishes that are easy to change. But we've been lucky with this first customer. I don't expect that's going to be the same. If someone is building a single family home with us, I expect that they might want more. So this is an area that we're going to keep learning by partnering with developers first and build a good library of options and ones that we have conviction in.
So on a recent HousingWire virtual panel, Ivy Zellman, the very well-known housing market analyst and just analyst period, said that we don't have a home supply issue, we have an affordable home supply issue. Do you agree with that statement?
Absolutely, and I also feel like there's a lot more nuance to that statement. Right? Again, not an expert in the overall macro environment and how we think about housing supply, but at least the way we see it and we feel like it's, again, construction is very local, a lot of local implications here. If I look around, so we're getting more familiar with the New England market. Their observations point on, right? I think they're most. Given the inflation in construction costs and just some of the overall inflation and cost of land in infill markets, the only way that developers can make sense of projects is to build homes that are retailing for like $1.5–2 million. Like that's what you kind of see in a lot of the retail segment.
Right. Not affordable.
They're not affordable. But I think it was John Burns, who was the other housing data analyst. They made an observation, and you have to fact check me with him or someone else, but they said that supply is supply, because the moment you create supply, even at that price point, it means that someone who was living in $1 million home is upgrading their lifestyle to get to the bigger home. And then they're opening up space in the market for upwards mobility for everyone else. So they were arguing that supply is supply. We just need more of it. I think the challenge here is you need supply in the right places at the right time and obviously the right price. And so to us, we've been sort of focused on the piece of the question for supply, which is how do we make sure we can drive down the cost of supply, drive down the speed so you're actually able to react to market cycles more quickly and get more predictability so that way you're not having to hedge. Like to do the whole industry hedges on everyone's schedules to everyone's cost, that the final project cost is always seem they're on a hair's edge of actually being viable. If you can bring predictability in the industry where you can say, your home, dear developer, is going to cost you $320,000 a unit, and we can guarantee you that price plus minus X% based on some things we haven't fully bottomed out on yet. But it's going to take exactly 3 months to get it from the moment you allow us to take site control and start. Like they can start making higher quality decisions and how they think about the overall project viability. So we feel like there's just a little bit of this unpredictability in the market that then has the developer hedging significantly what they think their actual costs will be. And by the time they're trying to get their LPs on board, like every project always seems like it either did not pencil because everyone hedged so much that the cost didn't make sense, or the costs were really that high that it didn't make sense. So in our case, we believe that you have to be predictable. The more the industry can become predictable across the supply chain and across the construction value chain, I think we'll unlock better quality decisions. And the place where we're hoping to move the needle on is on the speed and the cost of the project we're going through, where we're just fundamentally changing the developer perspective on, they're like, hey, we can actually make the math pencil to build homes that are $750,000 each instead, because we're still able to get the returns we need for the time scale that we need. And so we're going through this exercise right now. We're co-developing a 12-unit project up in Devon's, Mass. It's an existing it was an old army base. We're partnering with Mass Development. We're kind of in the exploration stage today. But as we go through our site evaluations, etc., like this project, like most homes there will retail for about $700,000 to $750,000 a unit, and these are some extremely high performance homes where not only are you getting them at a fairly lower purchase price point, but your actual operating costs are also going to be about 80% lower than if you're buying a home that was not built to the energy standards we're building them to. So we think there's a real pathway here where technology allows you to unlock those economics and get that predictability and speed. And we're hoping that that kind of supply allows developers to make other choices. Obviously, the place where I think and this is a forum to call for action, I think there's a place here where zoning gets to play a big role, which is if zoning makes it easier to reduce minimum lot sizes, allows developers to subdivide lots pretty quickly to actually build more housing density on existing lots, and so kind of reduce the cost basis you're carrying for land as part of a project. I think we could actually build a lot more starter homes, build a lot more homes that are reasonably priced for the markets they're in, but also create a lot more supply almost instantaneously. Today, I think we're all fighting an uphill battle on just meeting with zoning regulations that are pretty archaic, that just don't make the economic math pencil to get homes at the price points that people are looking for.
Really interesting. So last question, could you walk me through your next 12 months as CEO and co-founder of Reframe Systems? How are you thinking about scaling up the company and starting to roll out this mini factory concept?
Absolutely. So today, as we look at 2025, we're already building about 30 times more this year than we built last year. So we're obviously kind of going through that curve as a startup. We'll end this year with between 18 to 25 homes that are built across a mix of triple deckers, duplexes, and bungalows. And we're also taking on 2 projects out in Altadena that will actually be shipping from Massachusetts initially. The cost differential is high enough that it surprisingly makes sense today, but that's a way for us to start getting a foothold in the market to eventually then make the case for a local microfactory we will deploy in 2026 in the Altadena, LA County region, as an example. On the Massachusetts, New England side, we're already seeing a spike in pipeline for multifamily. So for listeners who are not from here, there was a pretty heavy legislation that was passed. One of the biggest things was called the MBTA Housing Choice Law, which allows communities to build housing by right, so multifamily housing by right across communities. And that took effect on Jan 1st, 2025. And we've seen a pretty huge spike in developers looking at parcels that they already own that allows them to build 3-story multifamily by right. And that's been driving a lot of demand. We've seen similar upzoning in the city of Cambridge, where now you can build up to 6-story structures by right on all single family lots. So needless to say, like our pipeline's doubled in the last 3 months, and most of the entries have been for projects that are small multifamily to large multifamily. So if these start continuing, and we kind of see we're still trying to land what the timeline's going to look like, if they'll start construction in 2026 or 2027, depending on that timeline, we will very quickly be out of capacity in our current microfactory here, which means we'll have to set up microfactory number 2 in Massachusetts. So if the current momentum continues, we expect that we're launching 2 microfactories next year, one in California and one in Massachusetts, and just continue to kind of build out housing on both coasts.
Fascinating. I think this has been a really interesting conversation, and I would love to bookmark 12 months from now. Maybe we can have you back on and talk through your progress and what you're learning from having multiple microfactories.
Absolutely. We would love to do that, share our lessons, and invite people to come obviously visit the microfactory we have here and the future microfactories that we open up.
Amazing. Vikas, thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Diego.